Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Jamming with Jason. Today, you're going to want to listen to this entire episode. And why? Because we're going to be talking about the future of work. And whether you realize it or not, work is changing significantly, which means there's some things you probably need to start doing now to prepare so that you are ready for the future of work. So with that, let's cue the episode.
Hi, I'm Jason Mefford, and you're in the right place to start transforming your career and life with this podcast. I've been in the trenches as an executive leader, and now I'm an executive coach and confidential advisor to executives all over the world. I use a multidisciplinary approach to improve learning that drives transformation by getting to the root cause in a practical, no-nonsense way. I love learning and sharing what makes people tick. You get both education and entertainment, since learning shouldn't be boring, right? But that's enough about me. This podcast is a combination of intuitive leadership, neural influence, and mental mastery to take your career and life to levels you've never thought possible. If you're wanting to improve yourself, develop stronger relationships professionally and personally, make quicker, better decisions, and become a more effective leader, then of course, this podcast is for you because you are going to learn how to manage emotions in yourself and others, avoid burnout, stress, and anxiety, master your mind, get people to listen and take action, and become a lifelong learner. And when you do that, you will have a positive mental attitude, executive leadership presence, and the skills to know exactly what to say and do in any situation. I'm glad you're here. So, let's get started.
Well, hey, Greg, it is great to have you with me today. This is one of my favorite topics, and I think it is for you too, talking about the future of work. So welcome onto the show.
Hey, thanks, Jason. It's great to be here, and it's great to meet you too. So
Well,
we really appreciate it.
yeah, well, and I know we ended up hooking up, I think through a mutual acquaintance, right? So again, this is where I tell people, hey, community is important. Here's an example, right? We both know the same guy, and he's like, hey, you two should talk. So we talked, and here we are, right? But maybe just help people kind of understand a little bit about your background, who you are, and why this topic of future of work is something that you're talking about as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. So we got into the future of work about, 25 years ago. I'm an engineer, and we brought somebody into Portland. I was basically chairing a economic development committee. Intel at that time was bringing in a lot of fabrication shops into the Portland area, Portland, Oregon. The fabs basically make silicon chips, and we needed a speaker for our Friday program. And there was a guy out there called Gordon Moore, one of the founders of
Oh, yeah, one of the founders of Intel.
Absolutely. And, he basically came up with this idea of Moore's Law.
Yep.
Moore's Law basically is pretty simple. If you got a chip, it's going to double in speed every 2 years, or it's going to cost half as much. And we were wondering, as an engineer, is there a human element? Is there a people component to that? In other words, do we, to be marketable, functional as engineers, do we need to basically retread ourselves in education or in skills or in aptitudes? And the question is, there's a half-life in product development, meaning the knowledge in the field doubles in so many years. So if we say 4 years is the half-life, that basically means that the amount of information, the amount of knowledge, the amount of data in that field is going to double in 4 years. And then 4 years again, it's going to double. So let's say that I'm an engineer and I graduate at 22. 26, knowledge is doubled. I'm 30, knowledge is doubled again. So since I
Yeah, but
graduated,
it's compounding too. It's not just double, it's compounding, right?
absolutely, that's a great point. Am I still marketable by the time I'm 30? Am I still, will somebody still want me if I haven't gone back and gotten some skills, some new technologies under my belt? That was the assumption. And Gordon thought about it for a second and said, yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
All engineers are techie workers of one form or another. So let's fast forward to the present. The big thing right now is we're all technical workers of one form or another. It doesn't matter if you're a nurse, if you're a doctor, an engineer, an auditor. Knowledge in your field is going to double. It could be 8 years, it could be 4 years. If you're in the bleeding edge discipline like artificial intelligence, it's going to double every year.
Mhm.
And the question is, if you don't retread, meaning go back to school, if you don't update your skills, if you don't become current, are you going to be functionally illiterate and potentially not marketable? That's the big question that drove us.
Well, it's interesting because you bring that up because I remember, I think it was a study that IBM did, where it was talking about, that with the doubling of knowledge.
Yep.
And if for a long time, I mean, it was they went back to like the beginning of the human epoch of history kind of thing, right? And it's like it took 20,000 years, to double, but from that point on, it's just gotten faster and faster and faster. And so, I think even like with Moore's law, when Gordon came up with this 25, 30, 40 years ago, it was every 2 years, every 18 months. But I think even in that space, it's sped up quicker than that. And I think
Absolutely.
you're seeing the same thing, right? From a technical worker standpoint, it's speeding up. You're lucky if it's only going like every 4 or 5 years. Most likely it's quicker, quicker than that for most people.
And the fact is now all of us work with technology in one form or another.
Yep.
So before it applied to engineers, but since we're all technical workers in one form or another, it's going to impact all of us.
Well, and it's interesting because, so here's another like real life thing
Uh-huh.
is I heard about attorneys is, anytime that you go into like discovery, they gotta weed through, boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff. A lot of the cost of litigation is this discovery phase. And I've heard that even some law firms now are using AI to replace the people. And they can actually chomp through all of this digitized data much quicker and more accurately than the attorneys could. And so even when you take something, that seems okay, yes, it's technical, but you always think of an attorney as like more like, I don't know, hands-on, personal, human kind of connection. That's even going away, right?
Well, that's a good point. So a lawyer for a
Mhm.
big white firm is going to run you $600 an hour.
Mhm.
That's not partner level. That's
No,
a senior, basically a senior
partner is going to be
associate.
1,000 to 15 an hour.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
And when I mention that in my podcasts, people say, no, nobody makes $1,500 an hour. Yes, they do.
I do.
And what's happening is $600 an hour lawyers, legions of them coming out of school, basically 24, are going to be doing this discovery. You can get an AI, once you digitize all the data, an AI product can do that faster, better, and cheaper than a 600, not one, I'm talking about 10 or 20. And they call it e-discovery. So that's one example. The lawyer might go and litigate, but what happens if that lawyer does e-litigation, electronic litigation? you know.
Hey, I mean, it could come to the point, right, where in the future there's like some AI judge. Who knows, right? And both sides are arguing their case electronically. I don't know. I mean, it could get there. I mean, science fiction, again, if you go back to the 50s and 60s when sci-fi first started, or like, okay,
Uh-huh.
go back and watch Star Trek, like the first version of Star Trek, and this
70, 67.
67, yeah. the technology from there, we've surpassed that already, right? So what used to be science fiction is now science faction, and we're actually living with it, right? Wow. So how have you? I guess let's try to relate this back to people as well, right? Because again, I mean, I want people to walk away with, okay, well, this is nice, Moore's law, blah 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 blah, but how does this actually affect me? And I think you've kind of seen it from your profession, from the engineer side. I've been seeing it from my side, the risk managers, the auditors, the accountants. But what does this actually mean for real human beings? How is this going to impact them? What do they need to do so that they don't just get outsourced to a machine?
Well, here's the thing that's scary with these machines. These machines used to be what you programmed in would be what you'd program out, what you come out. These machines now are becoming smart. So I pose a question every time I give these talks about a Siri product or a smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
In 3 years, could be less, that smartphone you carry is going to have all the information in your profession. It's going to be able to do data searches. It's going to be able to find precedent. It's going to be able to do e-discovery. It's going to be able to do risk analysis.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be able to do accounting analysis, figure out P&Ls. It's going to be able to do a lot of work. And what's going to happen is that machine is going to have risk-based problem solving and risk-based decision-making smarts into the machine. And the big challenge for us all workers, it doesn't matter which field. I mean, even laying bricks, now they have AI robots laying bricks. Think about a smartphone that you're going to be working with in 3 years that's going to be able to make decisions and solve problems based upon historical knowledge quicker, better, and faster than you. That's a challenge. And the question is, what are the protocols? What are the rules of engagement between us, people, and that machine that's going to be right next to you?
Well,
What are
it's
the
the old,
rules? Yeah.
yeah. Well, and I remember, Warren Bennis used to be a professor at USC, my
Yep.
alma mater for my master's, right? But I remember he he said, in the future, factories, because I have a manufacturing background, but factories will be made up of three things. It will be a machine, it will be a man, and it will be a dog. And the machine does the work. The man is there to watch and make sure the machine is working. And the dog is there to make sure the man does not touch the machine. Right. And when he said that, I don't know, 20 or 30 years ago, it was kind of funny, but now it's almost like, my gosh, how far away are we from that? Right. Because I know in my experience from manufacturing, I mean, I saw pictures from 50 years ago where we would literally have like 2,000 people doing stuff in a factory. Now that same factory only has 50 or 100 people because the machine's doing everything that the people used to do.
And now we thought as knowledge workers, we were pretty protected because we had discipline specific, we had functional specific, we had location specific information, and we had the skills for problem solving, decision making. Now, a lot of that is being taken away from us, unfortunately. And every company now is developing these smart, whatever we want to call them. A robot is essentially a machine. Siri is a machine. What are we going to do when we have a smart work Siri or Alexa? What are the rules of engagement? What are our responsibilities and the machine's responsibilities? What are the expectations from the employer or the machine? That's what's scary, and it's happening very, very quickly.
Well, and I think, especially, some of us like you and me that have been kind of geeky, techie, nerdy about this stuff for a while, we've been kind of seeing it coming, but I think especially this last year, with things totally getting turned upside down, right?
Absolutely.
And now companies are starting to, reassess their whole go to market, how what they're doing, the goods or services that they're providing. And like you said, I mean, some stuff, I grew up the son of a contractor, right? And I never would have thought that houses could be built by machines, but I've watched like a 3D printed house get made in one day, right? I mean, so it's like, um, you know, companies are looking at this now, right? So have we just really kind of pushed up what was inevitable, but maybe was out 10 or 20 years? Have we just pushed that up and accelerated it even more now because of what we've gone through this last year?
I think so. This COVID has just simply been makes all of us, me as an individual, me as a company, whatever we do, I've been forced to assess or reassess everything: our work, our products, our assumptions, our business model, what we outsource, what we insource. Manufacturers are reevaluating the classic make or buy decision from 30 years ago.
Yep.
Everything is being reassessed. And, unfortunately, there aren't that many models. I mean, this, quite frankly, we haven't had a pandemic in almost 100 years.
Yeah. None of us remember the old one.
Yeah, we don't remember the old one, obviously. Companies, I think, all over the world are looking at work, looking at life through a new filter. And that filter is going to be risk-based. I'm sorry, I was about to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because one of the points that you made that I think is, I just want to reiterate with people, because, again, I'm not trying to scare the hell out of everybody, but I am trying to scare the hell out of you in some ways, right? But you brought up, you said, knowledge workers thought they were safe.
Yep.
And I think that is a common belief that most people have, right? Like, when I went to college, I got an accounting degree. Well, why did I get an accounting degree? It's not because I loved doing debits and credits and wanted to be a bookkeeper, but from a practical perspective, right? Hey, with an accounting degree, I'd always be able to fall back on something and always be able to get a job. But I don't know if that's true anymore, right? Because again, just like we saw, traditional bookkeepers, the people wearing the green visors, rooms and rooms of people posting to ledgers are no more, because now the computer does it. Now we have financial analysts, but again, if you can teach the computer how to do all of that decision making, then again, those jobs could kind of go away, right? So we're not safe. So that's why we're having this discussion. But again, you said everybody's going to be looking more for risk-based. So maybe kind of talk a little bit about that. What do you mean by that? How does that kind of show up?
That's an interesting point. Our firm is a bunch of geeks. We're a quantitative shop. We do analytics. Specifically, we do SIP, critical infrastructure protection, forensics, assurance, and analytics. Like we mentioned, that FERC NERC type of connection. And we're finding that for our field, which is very niche, it's an engineering risk type of field, the prism, the filter, the lens that we looked at all of our work was through risk. Now I think everybody, because of COVID, is looking at life, is looking at work through that less risk lens. Should I go shopping? Have I had my inoculation? Should I wear gloves? Should I have a mask? How long should I be there? What type? What age am I? Just simply living and working now, risk is becoming much more personal to all of us.
Well, and I think it's interesting, because as you say that, you and I have been dealing with risk management things for decades, right? But it's funny, especially since 2008, 2009, that was the big, when we had that banking crisis, the recession at that point, it woke people up to this whole idea of risk management, or maybe more formalized, of using certain terms, calling it risk. And what's been funny is the word risk, you can see regular people using that word much more now than they ever did. And again, like this last year, especially because people are looking at the risks, are trying to, mitigate the risks of getting COVID. So, you wipe down, you wear a mask, you wear the hand sanitizer, you wash your hands 20 times a day, right? But even the carryover, because I'm an American football fan, and I remember I was watching I think it's a show called Hard Knocks, and
Uh-huh.
they were doing some info. It was this last season where they were talking about the Rams, which is my team, and the Chargers, because they're both here in LA. And I remember the coach, Sean McVay of the Rams, as they were interviewing him, or there were different, snippets, he was using the word risk a lot, more so than I would have expected in that profession even. And yes, I mean, that's what they're trying to reduce risk, right? They're trying to move the ball down the field. They're trying to understand what are the likely risks, what's the defense going to do to stop the play that we're going to have.
Hmm.
That's
Hmm.
all normal, but the fact that he's actually using the word risk, and I hear people outside of the risk management profession using the word risk so much more, I guess that probably means all of us need to understand risk better as well, right?
Well, when they look at AI, so over the last 5 years, actually, we've been involved with AI for about 30 years. AI is not a new discipline, it's
Yeah.
been around.
Yep.
The only thing that's changed is the machines processing power is much faster,
Hmm.
and they've gotten a little bit smarter. But the idea has been around for 30 years. Well, actually, probably 50 years. What's scary now about this whole area is that the machines are getting smarter. They're getting proactive, preventive, predictive, and now even preemptive. So
Hmm.
those four P's that used to be the distinguishing characteristics of knowledge workers now, those machines have. And the question is, when those machines have it, what do we bring to the table? It used to be, what did the machine bring to the table to support us as decision makers or as knowledge workers? Now the machines have that. And we, or whoever is doing some work, they've got to sort of understand, how are they going to work cooperatively? Is it, with these smart objects, and smart machines? And that's going to require some type of training, um, and possibly developing some numerical type skills, learning to code, learning to read code, learning to uh, you know, learning how to automate processes, which we don't want to do sometimes because they can basically change our basic work function.
Yep.
The classic example we've seen is a number of workers that we've seen will bring in machines, and they're given, say, a 20% bump for 6 months. And all of a sudden, that machine, that AI product, takes over a lot of that person's function. And all of a sudden, a department is halved in size, you know, and that's
Well,
frankly very scary for a lot of folks. It would be for me.
yeah. Well, and so what I'm kind of hearing then, I guess, is this is probably true for everyone, right? Is that more and more of our jobs are technology dependent, right? So I remember one thing that we said before is, hey, there used to be this big split in auditing. We'll just use that as an example, right? Well, there's financial auditors, there's operational auditors, there's IT auditors. Okay, that's how it was kind of used to be kind of segregated. And now we kind of joke that no, every auditor has to have a basic knowledge of IT to audit, because IT goes through everything, right? And so even your example of, hey, maybe one of the skills that we need is to actually learn how to code, right? Again, there's different languages or other stuff like that, but it's no different if we use an analogy of, we went from typewriters, clank, 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 clank typewriters to word processors, right?
Yep.
So we had to make that transition. We had to understand how to use computers, how to use word processing programs. That was just a normal evolution of the workforce. And we're going to be seeing more and more of those kind of things. I'm guessing, again, from a technical perspective, we're going to have to all become more familiar and more comfortable with technology in general. At least that's one thing. I know there's some other things that I'm sure we're going to talk about here in just a minute, but that's probably one thing that people really need to skill up on.
Over a bunch of years, I've written about 30 books. And I started with a typewriter, then I moved to the word processor.
Mhm.
Now I use voice recognition. And when I dictate, exactly. And,
which is funny because that's an older technology that we used to do, right? We used to dictate for people to use the typewriter to type it out.
And the voice recognition was about 90% accurate when I started. Now the voice recognition, not for recognition systems, but voice transcription.
Mm-hmm.
That's a major difference in language. Voice transcription is 99.5% accurate. Think about that.
Mm-hmm.
So I dictate my book and I begin to basically frame it afterwards. Chop this, move this, anyway, you get the idea.
Mm-hmm.
Book writing is changed for me. It's just simply talking in front of a computer or, some type of smart program. And we're going to see that with everything, unfortunately. In auditing, where you folks, meaning internal auditors, left off would be the technology part, the computer systems, the cybersecurity, the supply chain operations. That was our function. Now internal auditors are doing that same function because they've expanded their domain. The CPA firm now is developing new standards for doing supply chain audits. They're developing new standards for almost everything. So a lot of what we would call functional areas like engineering are morphing together. You don't find simply a mechanical engineer anymore. You're finding an engineer who knows mechanical, industrial, manufacturing, cyber. Anyway, you get the idea. And that's happening in all functions, including internal auditing. It's no simple, it's not simply anymore a CPA or CIA. It's cyber operations and supply chain at a minimum, and IT, obviously.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because as you talk about that, historically university educations used to be liberal arts was the general, right? So you go, you learn a little bit about a lot of stuff so that you're very broad in your knowledge, and that helps you view the world differently, right? Helps you make better decisions as a manager, blah 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 blah, all those kind of things, right? So up until I don't know exactly the timing, but it was probably maybe 50 years ago when the traditional liberal arts university degree switched to becoming more technical. And so even though you're getting a university degree now, it's very similar to what trade schools used to do, right? Now they give you a little bit. That's what your prerequisites are, right? Oh, you got to take a history class, you got to take an art class, and then the rest of your 3.5 years is going to be technical about whatever your topic is. And it sounds like, again, as you're talking there, maybe the old liberal arts are that broader understanding, because like you said, you can't just be good at one particular thing. You need to know a little bit about a lot of different things today.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Jason. And the question is, it was interesting, Bureau of Labor Standards, that's a US federal agency, used to say, you're going to have so many jobs over your lifetime. Yeah. Every 2 or 3 years, you're going to have a new job. Now their mantra is you're going to have a new career every 3 to 4 years, not job any longer, career.
Yeah. And to have a completely new career means having to get some continuing professional education, get some sort of certification, go back and maybe get another university degree. I mean, all these different things, you know, and again, because I like to tell people, books are great. I love books. I read a lot of books, but a book by itself doesn't prove anything to anybody. You can't put, I read 15 books last year on your resume, but you can put a certification, you can put training courses, university degrees. Those are things that actually can be career capital, if you will, that you can put on, right?
Yep.
So we all need to go back and do that. I kind of joke with people because especially in a lot of the technical areas, you have to get 40 hours of CPE a year. I think it might be the same true in the engineering side, right? And I tell people, look, you don't need 40, you need 400 hours probably a year now. And if you're only doing the 40, you're getting behind. Has that been true even on your side too?
Absolutely. So this is a good time for a plug for your company. You're doing the right thing in terms of reforming and reshaping your company to certifications.
Yeah.
Because we're going to see people, instead of having a 4-year college degree, having 10, maybe even 20 certifications, initials after their name.
Yep.
And that's going to have the same type of cachet to enhance their brand equity. So you say brand capital. I would use the word brand equity.
Brand equity.
And we're going to have that portable brand equity moving from job to job to job.
Well,
and of course, we hope
that is one of the reasons why we're doing it, because again, I've been seeing this coming for a long time. You know, and as being a hiring manager for many years as well, right? Having things like that on somebody's LinkedIn profile or on their resume helped me to sort out who it was going to be, right? But again, it's like you're saying, you know, if we have to have, let's say, 5 or 6 different, you know, knowledge areas that we need to know about, you're not going to go back and get 5 or 6 university degrees. Are you kidding me? You don't have 20 years to do that, right? You also don't have years of doing archaic kind of certifications the way that they've been done. And that's why there's been such a proliferation of these new modern certifications as well, is because you don't have 5 years to get a certification, right? You've got to do something quicker, because you can't wait 5 years to get your next job. Your job's probably going to go away in 5 years before you can even get it.
Well, it's interesting. So this goes back to the value exchange between higher ed and a certification program like you would offer. A student in accounting, internal audit, risk management can go to Jason's certificate programs or certification programs and glue these things together to get the knowledge that somebody needs or an employer needs right now. So I was reading an article about Columbia in New York City. They have a program, $65,000 a year, including $20,000 a year to live in the city. Columbia on the Upper East Side is running $65K a year, $20K to live in New York. That's $85K post after taxes, right? Essentially. Assuming you're privileged or whatever the current term is. What's the ROI of that? 4 years, I don't know what 4 times 85 is, but you
about
get the idea. It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
Almost 400 grand, exactly. What's the ROI of that compared to Jason's program in IA or risk or accounting? Employers are going to be looking at people a lot more differently in terms of assets, the value add, what they can do. I mean, I've talked to my daughter. She's going to be applying for jobs against people who have degrees from named schools. And quite honestly, the employer is going to come up to that person in artificial intelligence or computer science and say, here's a problem. You've got 1 hour. Give me your methodology. Give me your assumptions. Give me your your flow chart. Give me your thinking in terms of how would you solve that problem. An hour comes by, they look at it, they say, you just passed the first part of the test. The second part will be, put all of this down in a program. Give me some script.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're applying to Google, Amazon, by the way, they only take about 1 out of every 100 applicants in software. They're not going to be looking at your solution in terms of, yeah, it does the job. They're going to be looking at your solution, meaning the script, in terms of how elegant it is, how simple it is, and how unique it is. And at that time, it doesn't matter if you went to Portland Community College or Stanford and Berkeley in computer science. The person who can answer that question is obviously going to get the job.
Well, and that's an interesting point that you bring up, because, again, for so long it used to be, hey, if I go to Harvard, if I go to Stanford, if I go to Yale, whatever it is, pick any of the top 100 universities out there. If I go and I get a degree, I got the pigskin hanging on the wall, that name is going to get me the job. Right. But that was always the intention. That's why people spend $400,000 going to do undergrad work, right? Because that's supposed to get them a job. But like you said, employers have changed how they're hiring, right? So that it's not just, you have to have certain things on your resume or on your LinkedIn profile, because if you don't have some of the minimum things, you're not even going to get an interview.
That's true.
But once you get the interview, you're going to actually have to show them that you know how to do it, right? Because it's like, I remember, Google for a long time has had these crazy kind of interview questions. I remember one of them was, if you're a dime at the bottom of a blender and the blender, starts, how do you get out of the blender? I don't know. I guess I'm not getting that job. I don't know, right? Or, they'll do things like that, or like you're saying, actually make you write some computer code, come up with a little program to try to actually help solve that problem. So it's, you got to get in the door by having some of the certifications or degrees or other things that show you're well-rounded. You do have a basic understanding of some of these things, but then you're going to have to prove yourself as well.
And quickly.
Yeah.
And quickly. So can I do a quick story of something that came up in the UK this week?
Yeah.
So in the UK, there's something called what we would call the AFL-CIO equivalent. They call it the trade union organization.
Mm-hmm.
And they made it a big deal with Boris Johnson to say, we don't want machines to be able to hire people. And the reason why the BBC made a big deal about it this week is because those machines now are hiring people, face unseen, sight unseen, and 2, they're promoting them and firing them, all automated. And the trade union of the UK was just simply up in arms. And it was such a big deal with Boris Johnson, the PM, the prime minister, and with the media, that the BBC had a whole bunch of programs and articles about it. Everybody did in the UK. And that's just simply a front end indicator that this now is going to become a public policy issue. How are we going to keep people employed and employable throughout their lifetime? This is a big deal right now with President Biden. He's pushing infrastructure. He's pushing, domestic, less outsourcing and more domestic production. Why? High-priced work for people. So it's not only becoming an individual issue, it's becoming a major global public policy issue.
Yeah, because it's interesting as we weave through this, it's going to take a lot of twists and turns, right? And that's why things like UBI, Universal Basic Income, other things like that are coming up from a political scene as well. So, and I know I could keep going on and talk to you for 2 or 3 hours about this and geek out, but we're going to have to kind of wrap it up a little bit for the podcasters this week, but, probably need to have you back again. But, I mean, really, really interesting stuff, Greg, because like you said, I mean, that's why when I met you, and it's like, we're seeing the same problem and trying to help it, but we're coming from completely different industries. But this stuff is real. and it's gotten pushed up so much quicker, right? That again, I mean, maybe if we can do kind of a few takeaways for people here at the end, but I know some of the stuff we talked about is, look, if you're really technical in one area, you probably need to branch out, right? You need to be technical, or at least have a basic understanding in lots of different areas now, and kind of create your portfolio, if you will, to help you be successful versus somebody else, right? Because the old days of, well, you used to work for a big four audit firm, so sure, I'll hire you as an auditor. Now it's like, no, I want to see that you understand agile auditing, and I want to see some basic data analytic skills, and I want to see some, right? Maybe there's 5 or 6 different things that you're going to need to have to succeed. So it seems like that's one that we've been talking about. Start getting some broader exposure, some broader certifications, other stuff outside of your very narrow niche. But what would be some other things for people to start considering or thinking, so that they can not have this tidal wave hit them in the back of the head?
That's a good point. I think the first thing we started this project called the Future Professions,
Mhm.
looking at, and you can visit futureprofessions.com. And the idea is every profession is going to change. Some now, slowly, some of them are going to change very rapidly. Look at your profession, look at your skill set, develop a ledger sheet, so to speak, of skills you have or skills you need to have. And if you're brave enough, go to your significant others, your friends, your boss, and say, I want to update my skills. What do I need to do to get that promotion, to get that salary increase? And do a 360 evaluation with your significant other, with your bosses, and your friends. Because change is going to happen in every profession. Understand what's going to happen and jump in front of that curve, the change curve. Because at the end of the day, I don't think your employer is going to look out for you. You have to look out for yourself.
That's probably the biggest takeaway, is you've got to take care of yourself.
Yes.
Right. And that's why I think, I mean, we talked about, like that Columbia program you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. 400 grand. It's going to take you a lot of years to get that back. But, especially some of these certification things that are out there, again, would you invest $2,000, $5,000 if it means that your next job, you get a $10, $20, $30,000 a year raise, right?
Absolutely.
And so again, you've got to start looking at yourself. We've been talking for a long time about the knowledge economy, right? But if you're your best asset, how much capital improvement are you doing in your asset, right? Are you just letting the factory rust away, or are you actually investing in getting more knowledge, getting more certifications, getting other stuff that's going to help you? And it does translate really fairly quickly into significant bump in salary for people.
Absolutely, Jason. Think of it this way. Things are changing: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, VUCA. And standing still in a moving stream means you're going backwards.
Mm-hmm.
You got to basically go with the stream, actually get in front of everything, see where the rocks are. And think of it as sort of a individual risk analysis. These are all the objectives you want to get to. Look at all the hindrances, obstacles, or or things that are in your way, and then do a risk analysis of your career. It's tough. It's very, very hard, especially if you bring other people, like your significant other or your boss, into that loop.
Mm-hmm.
But you're essentially investing in yourself, your brand equity, and think of it as sort of a capital expenditure. You're not going to be able to increase production or increase your personal output unless you invest in yourself. That's the bottom line.
Well, it is, and I like how you use that. So everybody go out, start doing an individual risk assessment on your career. But
Yep.
again, don't just look at what is it going to take me to invest. Do it like you would do an ROI calculation for your business, right? Hey,
That's right.
if I invest $5,000 in a couple months, right? To get some new certification, to take a coding class or whatever it is, what is that going to mean for me on the reward side? And if the answer is, hey, I can, move laterally, or I can move to a different profession, and earn 20, 40, 50,000 a year more. And that's
Yep.
realistic for a lot of people. I mean,
Yep.
there's certain career bumps that when you move, it's like 50 grand, folks. And I'll tell you, 50 grand a year in your pocket, that's a big difference in lifestyle for most people. If you're
Absolutely.
willing to do that capital expenditure investment, as you said up front, you're not going to get the 50 unless you spend the 2 or 5.
That's exactly right. And that's the cost of a certification.
Yeah.
The difference is, instead of getting that certification every 5 years or getting PDHs or professional development hours, you're going to be doing that yearly, if not quarterly. That's the big difference now.
Yeah.
You've got to look out for number one.
Great stuff, Greg. Great stuff. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
I love talking to you about this because, again, like you said, it's one of the reasons why I do what I do is I've been seeing this coming for a while, and I don't want people to get, slapped in the back of the head when the tidal wave comes. I want you to already have your boat and be in the water paddling, before this ends up coming. And like you said, I think, from all the stuff that we've talked about, it's just coming quicker than we even anticipated before. So do what you can, start thinking about it, find those gaps, and actually do something so that you can jump in front of the curve instead of getting slammed by the curve when it comes.
So let me finish with one metaphor, Jason. Instead of being in a rowboat, you want to be in a fast, speedy cigarette boat with 1,000 horsepower in the back. And I think your certifications are going to help people get to where they want to be and go.
Yeah, thanks. I tend to go back to the old archaic ones, but you're right. It should be one of those 1,000 horsepower jet boats that you're going, not even just even a rowboat. Because when people are getting in the rowboat, you want to be getting in the speedboat. So
yeah. Yeah, well, it's the same idea, same metaphor, a little bit more horses in the back,
Well, it's better to have the horses in the back instead of the horses in the front with the buggy too, I guess.
So. I've been in both places, Jason. I'd rather have them in the back pushing me.
It's better in the back. It's better in the back. Well, Greg, thanks again for taking time today. And like you said, you made reference to the futureofprofessions.com. As a website where you guys have some stuff out there that you've been doing. So again, another thing you can do this week, go check it out. Go start seeing, again, don't take my word for it. Don't take Greg's word for it. Even just do a couple of Google searches and you're going to realize, holy shit, these guys are actually talking about something that's really happening. But whatever you do, just start doing something. Don't stand in that moving stream and get left behind.
Can I plug my book?
You can. Yeah. Well, because you're still working on it, or this is one that just came out?
It's the one that just came out. So yeah. Working It, Disruption Rules, COVID edition, came out about 3 weeks ago. Check it out on Amazon. It's fairly cheap. The reviews are 5s. Fortunately, knock on wood, as I knock on my forehead. And Jason's getting his copy this afternoon. So hopefully he can even give a review online.
Well, no, I will. And yeah, we'll plan to include links to both of these in the show notes down below as well. So again, if you're a listener that usually doesn't look at the show notes, if you want them, they're down below in the show notes. If you don't see them in the podcast player, check my website because they'll be on the blog post down below as well. So a couple of good resources, things for you to actually do this week. So go out and do them.
Absolutely.
And we'll catch you all on the next episode of Jamming with Jason. Have a great rest of your week.
Hey, terrific. Thanks a lot for having us. Take care. Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for listening to today's episode of Jamming with Jason. Keep on rocking in the audit world, and if you enjoyed this episode, please share with your friends and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know what you enjoyed the most about the podcast, and you may even be featured on a future episode. When you're ready to turbocharge your leadership development, join the Briefing Leadership Program, where you get access to everything in one place and can interact directly with me in the group. If you'd like to earn continuing professional education for listening to today's episode, head on over to C-Risk Academy's video on-demand learning platform at ondemand.criskacademy.com. Not only do you get a CPE certificate, but you will also have access to hundreds of video on-demand learning opportunities. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are that of the individuals and not of their respective organizations.